Damien Carter, a young and handsome millionaire, the owner of a large real estate investment and development corporation, sat quietly by the large glass window of the airport cafe, his eyes lost as he watched the hurried crowd pass by. He had never thought he would fall into this emptiness, a dull ache that had persisted since the day Sophia left without a single word of farewell. She disappeared as if she had never existed in his life, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. He had searched for her, from the familiar streets to the places they once visited together, but all in vain. His messages went unanswered, his calls met only with silence. In the end, he had to accept that Sophia had truly vanished from his world. But then, just when he was on the verge of giving up, fate played its cruel game once more. In the distance, amidst the bustling crowd, a woman walked with an eerily familiar presence. That hair, that figure. Damien's heart pounded. Sophia? Was it really her? Without a second thought, he sprang to his feet, rushing toward the woman. Overwhelmed with emotions, he reached out and embraced her tightly from behind, as if afraid that if he let go, she would disappear into thin air again. "You can't keep running from me forever," he blurted out, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotions. The woman froze. That moment stretched like an eternity before she slowly turned to face him. Serena Bennett stood frozen in shock as a complete stranger suddenly embraced her tightly from behind. A wave of dizziness hit her, and her heart pounded wildly in her chest. What the hell was happening? "You can't keep running from me forever," the deep, urgent voice whispered against her ear, filled with pain and desperation. Serena panicked. She had never seen this man before in her life. Instinctively, she struggled, trying to break free from his grip. "Let go of me!" she shouted. But the man only held her tighter, as if terrified she would vanish. Fear surged through her. Serena used all her strength to push him away, but it was futile. The stranger was too strong, and his embrace was too intense, like she was someone incredibly important to him. Damien, lost in his emotions, didn't realize the woman in his arms was resisting him. The sensation of holding Sophia again clouded his judgment. He only knew that he didn't want to let go. But then, as he felt her forceful struggle, a strange thought began to creep into his mind. Something felt wrong. The scent was different. The voice was unfamiliar. Damien blinked, the overwhelming rush of emotions giving way to clarity. He loosened his grip and, for the first time, looked carefully at the woman before him. His heart plummeted. This wasn't Sophia. She bore a resemblance, but her eyes were different, her expression unfamiliar, and even her voice was entirely distinct. A wave of embarrassment washed over Damien. "Damn it," he muttered, awkwardly stepping back. I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else." But Serena had no intention of letting him off so easily. Being unexpectedly grabbed by a stranger in the middle of a crowded airport had left her both terrified and furious. Without hesitation, she raised her hand and slap! The sharp sound echoed through the air. Serena's hand struck Damien's cheek with full force, leaving him utterly stunned. The pain wasn't just on his skin, it felt like it shattered what little dignity he had left. Every eye in the vicinity turned toward them. Damien stood frozen, unable to justify himself or react. "You lunatic!" Serena spat, glaring at him with pure disdain, before turning on her heels and storming off without a second glance. Damien remained there, still dazed. He touched his stinging cheek, feeling the heat linger. This situation was even worse than he could have imagined. Welcome to Soul Stories, Pooker. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow, means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am satisfied" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Damien Carter sat in silence in his apartment, the glass of wine in his hand nearly untouched. The dim light cast his shadow on the bare wall, and in the suffocating quiet, his mind drifted back to the strange encounter at the airport. That woman, he didn't know her name. He didn't know who she was. yet her image clung to him like a ghost he couldn't chase away. The moment he had embraced her, the warmth of her body, her fierce struggle, and most of all, the furious glare in her eyes, along with that stinging slap, all of it was etched into his mind like an indelible mark. Damien closed his eyes, but immediately her face appeared clearer than ever. Shock and anger had dominated her expression, yet beneath those emotions, he had glimpsed something else. Perhaps hurt? Or was it just fear? A stranger, a mere passing encounter, should not have affected him this much. But the strangest thing was that Serena didn't just remind him of Sophia, she stirred something else within him. Something far more intense and powerful than the pain of his past. Damien let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no amusement in it. "This is insane," he muttered, mocking himself. Yet no matter how much he tried to convince himself otherwise, the truth remained. Serena Bennett had left a mark on him. And while reason told him to forget, his heart whispered otherwise. Damien Carter stepped into the large conference room of the Children's Hospital with his usual composed and professional demeanor, but beneath the surface, an inexplicable unease stirred within him. The Carter Corporation had just partnered with the hospital to build a state-of-the-art pediatric medical center, and today was the first meeting with the medical team to discuss the project's implementation. Beside Damien were his assistants and executives, all familiar with his cold, unwavering focus when it came to business. Yet none of them noticed the subtle shift in his emotions, a vague premonition that something unexpected was about to unfold. The meeting began. Representatives of the hospital took turns introducing the medical team involved in the project. Damien listened attentively, his gaze scanning each individual with a professional detachment, until he froze. Her, Serena Bennett. Damien nearly forgot to breathe when he saw the woman standing on the other side of the room. Clad in a white lab coat, exuding professionalism, she was no longer the startled, furious woman from the airport. But there was no mistaking it. It was her. His heart pounded unexpectedly, a wave of emotions crashing over him. Surprise, confusion, and strangely, a spark of excitement. At that moment, Serena had yet to notice his presence. She was focused on the documents in her hands, her expression serious as she listened to a colleague speak. But then, when it was her turn to stand and introduce her role in the project, her gaze inadvertently met his. Time stood still. Serena stiffened, her eyes widening briefly as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. A flash of shock flickered across her face before it was quickly masked by a composed and professional demeanor. But Damien had seen it all. Leaning back slightly in his chair, he allowed the corner of his lips to curve upward as if entertained by the situation. Serena Bennett, pediatric doctor, the woman who had slapped him without hesitation at the airport, was now sitting across from him as the lead physician for the hospital's collaboration with the Carter Corporation. Fate, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. After the first meeting, Damien Carter could no longer deny one truth. He wanted to see Serena more. For the first time in a long while, he felt something different. Not the heavy obsession he had with Sophia, but something intriguing, like a challenge, a game of wits he wanted to play. And Serena Bennett was at the center of that game. He found her in the late afternoon on the hospital grounds reviewing the blueprint of the new medical center. Without warning, he approached and stood beside her. "How's the work going, doctor?" "Bennett?" His deep voice carried a deliberate emphasis on her title. Serena flinched slightly but quickly regained her composure. She glanced at him indifferently before turning back to the documents in her hands. "It's fine. Thanks for your concern, Carter." Her tone was firm, polite yet distant. Damien raised an eyebrow. "Carter?" Not a hint of friendliness, not even the slightest trace of unease like their last encounter. Interesting. "Just fine." He tilted his head slightly, intentionally provoking her. Serena closed the file in her hands and looked up at him with a professional demeanor. "Can we focus on work, Mr. Carter? I don't have time for small talk." Damien let out a quiet chuckle. "Are you avoiding me, doctor?" She met his gaze directly, unwavering. "I have no reason to." Her sharp response made Damien realize one thing. Serena was not as easy to handle as he had thought. After that, Damien didn't back down. He deliberately arranged meetings to coincide with hers. even adjusting his schedule to appear at the hospital more frequently. When she visited the construction site to check on progress, he happened to be there at the right time to inspect the designs alongside her. When she stopped by the hospital cafe, he coincidentally walked in and ordered the exact same drink. When she was deep in discussion with her colleagues over medical reports, he conveniently appeared, claiming he wanted to better understand the project. Serena noticed it, and she didn't like it. Every time Serena caught sight of Damien, she would quickly turn away or change direction. If avoiding him wasn't an option, she maintained absolute distance, responding with curt answers and never allowing their conversations to stray beyond work matters. Damien noticed that she even switched seats in the conference room, just to avoid sitting near him. Once, when he stepped into the elevator and saw her inside, Serena immediately pressed the door open button and walked out without hesitation. Damien chuckled. She was actually running away from him, but that only made him want to chase her more. Damien Carter wasn't the type to give up easily once he set his sights on something. And Serena Bennett, she was unknowingly becoming a challenge he couldn't ignore. A breaking point. Serena Bennett rarely allowed personal emotions to interfere with her work. She was the kind of person who remained calm, rational, and professional in all situations. But today, everything was too much. At the hospital, a critical surgery had failed, leaving her devastated. It wasn't her fault, but she couldn't shake off the feeling of responsibility. Seeing the pain in the patient's family's eyes felt like a heavy weight crushing her. Before she could even recover, she was pulled into another storm. Relentless pressure from the hospital board regarding the new medical center project. Endless meetings, constantly changing demands, and the overwhelming expectations that came with collaborating with the Carter Corporation. It all piled onto her, pushing her to the brink. The final blow came when a colleague accused her of being too focused on the project and neglecting her patients. Those words cut deep. That night, for the first time in a very long while, Serena decided to do something she always avoided. She went out for a drink. The bar wasn't too crowded, the dim lights casting a warm glow, and the soft hum of music just enough to make Serena feel at ease. She sat at the counter and ordered a strong drink without hesitation. She drank faster than usual, letting the alcohol seep through her veins, easing the tension in her mind. For once, she didn't care about work, the hospital, or the insufferable man who had been invading her life lately, Damien Carter. But fate had other plans. Just as she looked up, a familiar voice rang out beside her. "I never thought Dr. Bennett was the type to drink alone." Serena's head snapped toward the voice, and, as expected, Damien Carter was sitting right next to her, his signature smirk in place. She rolled her eyes and exhaled sharply. "You again?" "Me again," he shrugged, raising his glass. "Didn't expect us to share the same taste." Serena wasn't in the mood to deal with him. She already had enough on her plate, but for some reason, instead of getting up and leaving as she usually would, she remained in her seat. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe she was just too exhausted to run from him one more time. Damien noticed. He studied her for a moment before speaking again. "Rough day." For the first time, Serena didn't respond with her usual sharpness. She simply swirled her drink in her glass, silent for a moment before murmuring, "I gave it my all, but it never seems to be enough." Damien wasn't expecting that kind of honesty. He hadn't thought she would let her guard down, but maybe tonight was an exception. He watched her closely before nodding. "I know that feeling." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "What could you possibly not have enough of? You have everything, money, power, luxury. How could you understand?" Damien was quiet for a few seconds before pouring himself another drink. "I once had someone who meant everything to me." He took a slow sip, his gaze distant. "She left without a word. I searched for her, only to realize she was truly gone. That's when I understood what it meant to feel powerless." Serena looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see the arrogant, self-assured man she had always found infuriating. Instead, she saw someone carrying a deep, unspoken pain. Silence stretched between them. The only sounds were the clinking of glasses and the soft music in the background. "I guess that makes us both failures, huh?" Serena muttered, raising her glass. Damien let out a quiet chuckle, clinking his glass against hers. "Looks like it." That night, in a bar neither of them had planned to be in, Two people who had spent so much time trying to appear strong found a moment of quiet understanding in each other, blurring the lines. The alcohol dulled their senses, dissolving barriers and clouding judgment. Serena didn't remember how they left the bar. She only remembered fleeting glances, broken conversations, rare laughter between two people who were supposed to be at odds. And somehow, the night ended in Damien's apartment. The room was dimly lit, the glow from the streetlights casting soft shadows across the walls. Serena felt the warmth of the man in front of her, her heartbeat racing, mixing with emotions she never expected to feel. Neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, as if silently acknowledging that there was no reason to keep their distance anymore. The first kiss came like a sudden storm, tearing through whatever walls they had built. It wasn't gentle, it was a release of hurt, of pressure, of emotions buried too deep for too long. Every touch, every desperate breath, every embrace, they blended together as if tonight was all they had. The morning after. When Serena opened her eyes, the morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft rays across the unfamiliar room. Her head throbbed from the alcohol, but that wasn't what made her panic. She realized she was lying in bed, barely covered by the sheets, and beside her, Damien Carter was still fast asleep. Memories of the previous night came crashing back like a tidal wave. She shot up immediately, her heart pounding. "What have I done?" Serena ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady her breathing. This can't be happening. This was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a reckless night they both needed to forget. But as she frantically searched for her clothes, a deep, familiar voice broke the silence behind her. "Planning to run away?" Serena froze. Slowly she turned, only to find Damien watching her, his eyes still heavy with sleep, but with a hint of amusement as he took in her panicked state. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to regain her usual composure. "We were both drunk. Last night was a mistake. We should forget about it." Damien propped himself up on one elbow, tilting his head slightly as he studied her. "A mistake?" Serena tightened her grip on the fabric of her shirt, avoiding his gaze. "Yes, I don't want this to interfere with work, and I'm sure you don't want to be caught up in this mess either." Damien was silent for a few moments before a small smirk curved his lips. "If that's what you want..." Serena nodded quickly, grabbing her bag and making a beeline for the door, as if the longer she stayed, the greater the risk of making yet another mistake. Damien watched as she disappeared through the doorway, his gaze unreadable. She wanted to forget last night, but Damien was certain of one thing. He didn't. Damien refuses to call it a mistake. Damien Carter was not a man who accepted failure easily, and this time, he had no intention of letting Serena Bennett disappear from his life the way Sophia once had. After that fateful night, Serena deliberately kept her distance, avoiding him whenever possible. She buried herself in work, pretending as if nothing had ever happened. But Damien, he refused to accept that night as just a mistake. She could say whatever she wanted to escape, but he knew the truth. What happened between them wasn't just a reckless moment fueled by alcohol. It was something deeper, something undeniable. And he wasn't going to let her forget it so easily. Serena was already used to Damien's unexpected appearances in her professional life, but this time, his presence meant something entirely different. When she left a meeting, he was waiting outside with a cup of coffee, handing it to her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When she visited the construction site, he just so happened to be there, asking about details no CEO would normally care about. When she picked a small cafe to work alone, he accidentally showed up, pulled out a chair, and sat across from her. Frustrated, she glared at him. "What exactly are you doing, Carter?" Damien shrugged with an easy smile. "Nothing. I just happen to like this place." She narrowed her eyes, knowing full well he was deliberately messing with her. But what irritated her the most wasn't his persistence. It was the way her own heart started betraying her every time he was near. The confrontation. One day after a meeting, Damien blocked her path right before she could step into the elevator. "We need to talk." His voice was serious. Serena crossed her arms, her expression cold. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Damien stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. You can pretend that night meant nothing to you, but I don't believe it. Serena let out a quiet, bitter laugh, her eyes guarded. Do you know why I keep rejecting you? Damien remained silent, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath, then met his eyes. Because I don't want to be a replacement. Damien's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? You're not chasing me because I'm Serena Bennett. You're obsessed with me because I remind you of Sophia. Her voice was steady, but there was a flicker of pain in her eyes. I'm not her, and I refuse to be a shadow of your past. With that, she turned on her heels and walked away, leaving Damien standing alone in the hallway. The shift. Serena's words haunted him. Yes, he had once thought she resembled Sophia. But what he felt for Serena, it wasn't the same. With Sophia, it had been infatuation. With Serena, it was something he couldn't explain. And he knew, if he didn't prove that to her, he would lose her forever. So Damien changed his approach. He no longer accidentally showed up. He didn't hover around her like before. Instead, he let her see who he truly was. Not the arrogant CEO, not a man chasing an obsession, but a man genuinely drawn to her. He listened to her more. He cared about her work not just because of the project, but because it mattered to her. He made it clear that he valued Serena Bennett for who she was, not because she reminded him of anyone else. And no matter how strong Serena tried to be, no matter how much she denied it, Damien could see it. The walls she had built around herself, they were beginning to crack. A love that was never meant to be. After Damien's unwavering persistence, Serena finally let her guard down. No more cold avoidance, no more forced distance. Instead, there were long conversations, quiet evenings together, and warm moments neither of them had ever imagined sharing with anyone else. They began seeing each other outside of work more often. One evening, Damien brought Serena to his penthouse, opening a bottle of wine as they sat on the balcony, gazing at the city lights. You've never told me about your family, Serena murmured, resting her head on his shoulder. Damien was silent for a moment, his eyes distant. There's not much to tell. Serena reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I want to know. I want to understand you more. With a quiet sigh, Damien slowly began to speak. He grew up with a single mother. His father had abandoned them when he was just a child, leaving for another woman. He remembered the nights his mother cried in silence, the pitying looks from neighbors, and the cruel taunts from classmates about his absent father. And then he remembered the worst of it, his mother's heartbreak turning into depression until she was gone, leaving him utterly alone. I used to hate him, Damien admitted, his voice lower. I swore I would never become like him, never walk away from someone I love. Serena sat in silence, her heart aching at the pain in his voice. Then he told her about Sophia, about how she had entered his life like a whirlwind, about their passionate yet fractured love, and about the way she had vanished without a word, leaving him drowning in unanswered questions. I once thought she was everything, he confessed, but when she left, I realized I didn't love her because she was my destiny. I loved her because I was terrified of being abandoned again. Serena stayed quiet for a long time before gently squeezing his hand. You're not that abandoned boy anymore, Damien, and you're not your father. When he turned to look at her, he knew. Serena was not a replacement. She was the one who made him want to be a better man. That night, Serena opened up as well. She told him why she had chosen to become a pediatrician, because she had lost a younger brother when she was a child, and she never wanted another child to suffer the same pain. They shared their wounds, their scars, and between two broken souls, a love stronger than either of them had ever known began to take root. A fate too cruel. For the first time, Serena allowed herself to love without fear, but she had no idea that fate had already prepared a devastating truth she could never have expected. One day, while visiting her mother, an old name surfaced in conversation. William Carter. A strange chill ran down Serena's spine. Carefully, she asked, William Carter? What do you mean? Her mother hesitated before sighing. He was someone I knew a long time ago. When I was younger, I fell in love with a man who already had a family. Serena's heart pounded painfully. You mean he was married? Her mother nodded. Yes, he left his wife to be with me. But in the end, things didn't work out. Serena felt the blood drain from her face. Her lips were dry, her voice barely above a whisper. Did his wife have children? Her mother looked slightly surprised at the question, but then slowly nodded. Yes, a son. The world collapsed beneath Serena's feet. Damien Carter. His father had abandoned his mother for another woman, and that woman was Serena's mother, a love bound by fate and torn by the past. Serena felt like she was trapped in a nightmare. She tried to deny it, tried to convince herself that this was just some cruel coincidence. But the truth was undeniable. She had fallen in love with the son of the woman her mother had once destroyed. She had fallen in love with a man whose greatest pain was tied to a past in which her mother was a villain. How was she supposed to face Damien now? How could she look into his eyes without drowning in guilt? How could she love him when she was a part of the very thing that had broken him? And the most terrifying question, what would Damien do when he found out the truth? Would their love be enough to cross this boundary? Or was this the end? A love overshadowed by pain. Serena had never felt pain as suffocating as this. She loved Damien. She had never once doubted that. But now that love was buried beneath a bitter truth she could never undo. Her mother was the woman who had destroyed his family. The indirect reason his mother had fallen into despair. The reason he had grown up abandoned, carrying wounds no one could heal. Every time Serena looked into his eyes, she saw trust, devotion, and persistence. But she also saw the shadow of a boy who had been left behind. A boy who had suffered because of a past her mother played a role in. She had once told him, "You're not that abandoned boy anymore, Damien, and you're not your father." But now, she had become part of the past he had spent his entire life trying to escape. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't bear to see his face when he realized who she really was. Because once he knew, nothing would ever be the same. And if that was the case, she would rather be the one to leave first. A goodbye without words. That evening, Serena went to Damien's apartment as if everything were normal. But everything had changed. She sat on the sofa, watching him move around the kitchen. Every movement so familiar, so effortlessly caring, it made her heart ache. She wanted to memorize this moment, to hold on to it just for a little longer, before she walked away from him forever. Damien turned around and smiled. "You're acting strange tonight, Doctor." "Bennett." Serena forced a soft smile, but it never reached her eyes. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him from behind, holding him tightly as if trying to burn this warmth into her soul. "I just wanted to hold you for a moment." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Damien paused, slightly surprised, but he hugged her back, pressing his face into her hair. "That's strange. Usually you'd be complaining about how much oil I'm using." She let out a small laugh, but then a single tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't know if Damien noticed something was wrong, but she prayed that tonight would only be about this, about them, because by tomorrow, she would be gone. The letter. She sat at his desk, heart pounding as she put pen to paper. Her hands trembled as she wrote the words she knew would break them both. "Damien, I'm sorry for leaving this way. I once told you that I didn't want to be a replacement in your life. But now I've realized I am a part of the very pain you've had to endure. I can't stay by your side without feeling the weight of that truth. And I can't tell you because I'm afraid that once you know, you'll never look at me the same way again. Don't look for me, Damien. Let's pretend we never met. Let's pretend we never loved each other. This is the only way I can protect you, and the only way I can protect myself. Serena." She placed the letter gently on the table. Then she walked away. Serena Bennett never thought she would leave everything behind, her career, her life, and the man she loved. But when the bitter truth was revealed, she had no other choice. She couldn't face Damien. She couldn't look into his eyes without feeling guilt. And she couldn't let him know that her mother was the reason his childhood had been filled with suffering. So she left. No explanation beyond the letter, no goodbyes to anyone, Serena packed her bags and boarded the bus, leaving the city behind. The bus took her to a small seaside town where no one knew who she was, where no one knew her past. A place where there was no Damien Carter. The town was peaceful, a stark contrast to the noise and fast pace of the city. Small cobblestone streets, rustic wooden houses, and a vast, deep blue coastline under a glorious sunset. Serena rented a small house near the beach, simple but warm. Every morning she woke up to the sound of waves crashing, the salty scent of the air, and the feeling that she was in another world, a world where she could forget everything. But she didn't come here to hide forever. A week after arriving in town, Serena found a job at a free clinic for poor children. The clinic was small but always filled with patients. Most of the children came from poor fishing families who couldn't afford to visit larger hospitals. At first, Serena only intended to work here to fill the emptiness in her life. But the more she worked, the more she realized this was where she truly belonged. The children ran around the clinic calling her doctor. Serena, with innocent smiles. She treated small wounds, cared for fevers, and sometimes simply sat down and listened to their stories. Every day when she saw the bright, sparkling eyes of the children she helped, Serena felt that she still had some value, that she could still do something good, even if her heart still carried an unhealed wound. But no matter how busy she was, every night when she returned to her small house by the beach, Serena could never forget one thing. She missed Damien. She missed the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he made her feel loved in a way she had never known before. But she also knew she couldn't go back. Damien Carter deserved a life free from the shadows of the past, and she couldn't be the one to drag him back into that nightmare. So every night, she could only sit by the beach, silently watching the waves crash onto the shore, telling herself that she had made the right decision, even if it hurt her to the core. Serena's life in the seaside town continued, quiet but peaceful. She spent her days working at the clinic, helping poor children. At night, she returned to her small house by the beach, listening to the sound of the waves and trying not to think about Damien. But fate seemed unwilling to let her be. One morning when Serena got out of bed, a sudden dizziness hit her. She frowned, thinking she had simply overworked herself. But when the nausea started occurring regularly every morning, when her body became more fatigued than usual, a suspicion flashed in her mind. She hurried to buy a pregnancy test from the small pharmacy in town, her palm cold as she held it. She didn't want to believe what she was thinking. It couldn't be. But when two clear pink lines appeared on the test, Serena felt as though the whole world had collapsed beneath her feet. She was pregnant. She was pregnant with Damien's child. Are you still following the story? If you In the days that followed, Damien threw himself into searching for Serena. He hired a private investigator, checked every exit record, and searched for any trace of her. He drove to the places they had visited together, hoping to find a clue. He didn't eat, didn't sleep properly. Work became secondary. No one recognized Damien Carter, the strong, cold man he once was. Every time he heard news of someone seeing a woman who resembled Serena, he rushed to the location, only to be disappointed. Every night when he returned to the empty apartment, he would sit in the chair where she once sat, feeling the silence envelop him. She was really gone. For the first time in his life, Damien Carter felt helpless. He had everything: money, power, a successful career. But the one thing he wanted, he couldn't have. No one understood how important Serena was to him. No one knew she was the only one who made him feel like he no longer had to be lost in this life. She was the first person he wanted to be with, not because he feared she would leave him, but because she made him want to be a better man. But now she was gone. She had left him with a hole he couldn't fill. And the worst part was, he didn't know if he could ever find her again. Damien Carter had never been one to give up easily. When Sophia left, he searched desperately. But with Serena, he knew. He couldn't lose her like this. The past few months had been the darkest of his life. He had searched through every lead, from the hospital where she worked to the places she had visited. The private investigator he hired could only confirm one thing. Serena had truly disappeared, leaving no trace. But Damien didn't stop. He knew Serena wasn't the type to go on lavish trips or visit big cities. She was someone who sought peaceful places, places where she could help others. And it was that detail that led him to find her. One day, as he was reviewing reports from the investigator, Damien came across a small piece of information about a free clinic in a small seaside town. A female doctor who had arrived a few months ago with little personal information, but the descriptions of her. Immediately, Damien booked a flight. When Damien arrived in the small seaside town, he felt something very unfamiliar. It was completely different from the city where he and Serena had lived. No skyscrapers, no crowded streets, just small streets, roadside cafes, and the sound of the waves lapping at the shore. He headed straight for the free clinic. Anxiety flooded his heart. He wasn't sure how Serena would react when she saw him. Would she be shocked? Angry? Did she still love him? But when the clinic door opened, all those thoughts vanished, because right in front of him, Serena was standing there. But she wasn't the Serena he remembered. Slender, proud, always keeping her distance. Now she was pregnant. Her belly was large, clearly in the final months of pregnancy. Damien froze. Serena was also stunned when she saw him. Her face went pale, her eyes wide in shock. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. No one spoke in the first few moments, only silence, astonishment, and a storm of emotions swirling in both their hearts. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's my child, isn't it?" Serena tightened her grip on her hands, her eyes wavering. She wanted to lie, wanted to say that the child had nothing to do with him. But Damien's gaze was too sharp, too pained, like if she denied it, he would break down right there. She couldn't lie, and Damien didn't need to hear the answer, because just by looking at Serena, just by seeing her round belly, he knew the truth. He was about to be a father, and Serena, the woman he loved, had intended to keep this from him forever. Damien clenched his fists, a wave of pain and anger flooding his chest. He stared at her, as if searching for an explanation. "Why?" His voice cracked, full of hurt. "Why did you run? Why didn't you tell me?" Serena turned her face away, her eyes glistening with tears. "Because I didn't want to drag you into this. Because I didn't want you to suffer from the past." Damien stepped closer, his voice low but full of emotion. "Did you really think I would abandon you? Did you really think I wouldn't want this child?" Serena bit her lip, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know how to respond. She only knew one thing. Now Damien had found her, and she couldn't run away anymore. Serena sat across from Damien in her small house in the seaside town. The air between them was heavy, filled with emotions that could not be named. Damien had not left since finding out about the child growing inside her. But Serena knew she couldn't avoid the truth forever. She knew he wouldn't forgive her if she didn't explain the real reason she had pushed him away. And she also knew that once she told him, everything between them might never be the same again. She took a deep breath, her hands clenching at the edge of her shirt, trying to find the courage to face what she had been running from all this time. "Damien," her voice trembled. Damien stared at her, his gaze filled with pain and anger. "Say it, Serena. Tell me why you left me." She bit her lip, her heart feeling suffocated. Then, as if unable to bear it any longer, Serena suddenly dropped to her knees in front of him. Damien froze. "I'm sorry, Damien." Her voice choked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry for my mother. I'm sorry for what she did to your family. I'm sorry for being the third person who took your father away. I'm sorry for her, indirectly causing the death of your mother." Damien felt the world spinning around him. He looked at Serena, his body stiffening. Every word she spoke felt like a knife slicing deep into his heart. Her mother. The woman who had made his father abandon their family. The woman who had caused his mother to live in pain until she died. Damien couldn't breathe. He had always hated the woman who destroyed his family, always wondered how his father could leave them for a misguided love. And now the woman he loved, the one he had been searching for all these months, turned out to be the daughter of that very woman. He didn't know how to react. He stepped back. Serena saw it. She knew and she understood. Damien Carter was always strong, always decisive, but right now she saw the confusion in his eyes. He was struggling with himself. She lowered her head, tears falling onto the floor. "This is why I left you, Damien. I couldn't look at you every day knowing that my mother had caused you pain. I couldn't let you love me when that love would always be haunted by such a cruel past. Damien couldn't believe what he was hearing. He didn't care who Serena's mother was. He only knew that she was the woman he loved. He stepped forward, grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me, Serena, his voice hoarse. I don't care about your mother's past. I only care about you, about our child. No, Damien. Serena shook her head, trying to pull away. I can't let you get trapped in this tragedy. This tragedy isn't ours, Damien nearly yelled. It's the past. It's the mistakes of the previous generation, not ours. Why do you keep trying to push me away? Serena broke down in tears, but she remained firm. Because I can't let you face this truth every day. She choked. You think you can overcome it, but can you really forget? Can you look at me without thinking about your pain? I don't want you to live in suffering, Damien. I love you. And because I love you, I can't let you live like this. Damien clenched his fists. She was pushing him away. She was sacrificing herself to protect him, but she didn't understand that she was the only one who could heal him. He bent down, lightly touching her belly, the place where their child grew. Do you really think I can leave knowing our child is here? His voice was low, filled with pain. Serena placed her hand on her belly, feeling the life growing within her, but she remained resolute. Damien, I'm sorry, but I can't. She stepped back, her eyes full of despair. Damien looked at her, his heart breaking. She had made her choice. She had chosen to walk away from him, and this time he couldn't stop her. The air in the small seaside house became suffocating. Serena tried to hold on to her decision, but she hadn't anticipated that Damien wouldn't give up. He didn't yell, didn't get angry. He just stood there, his eyes filled with pain and sincerity, as if he was trying to use everything he had to keep her. And then he said something Serena had never prepared herself to hear. Do you really want our child to grow up without a father? She froze, her heart feeling as though it was being crushed. You know what I've been through, Damien continued, his voice growing quieter, filled with a sorrow that only those who have been abandoned could understand. You know how I grew up, in a broken family, with a desperate mother, and a father who never came back for me. He clenched his fists, his gaze darkening as if the painful memories of his childhood were returning to haunt him. I've asked myself 1,000 times, why did he choose to leave us? Why didn't he love me enough to stay? His voice broke for a moment, but then he regained his composure. I never got an answer, but I know one thing. I grew up with an empty space inside me that nothing could fill. He looked Serena directly in the eyes, his gaze burning with an unshakable determination. I don't want our child to go through that. Serena felt as if someone had drained the air from her lungs. She had always thought that leaving was the best way to protect Damien, but she had never thought about this, about the child growing inside her. This child would never know that its mother left its father for a reason it couldn't understand. It might grow up with questions that would never be answered. It might feel the way Damien once had, abandoned. She instinctively placed her hand on her belly, feeling the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. What was she doing? She had spent her life healing other children, ensuring they didn't suffer. But now she was taking away the most precious thing from her own child, the love of a father. A tear fell down her cheek. Damien! She choked, gripping her shirt tightly. He stepped closer, slowly, as if afraid she would run again. He raised his hand, gently wiping away the tear from her cheek. I don't care about your mother's past, his voice was soft but firm. I only care about you and our child. You can hate me, you can curse the fate that brought us into this tragedy, but you can't deny that we have something more important, a family. Serena burst into tears, her tears streaming down her face. She had been running for so long, trying to push Damien out of her life, but now every reason she had clung to seemed meaningless. Because the truth was, she loved him. She loved him so much that she was ready to sacrifice herself to protect him. But now she realized that leaving him was never the way to protect him. She had been wrong. She had been wrong from the start. Damien bent down, resting his forehead against hers, his voice rough. Let me stay by your side, Serena. She sobbed, the tears still falling. But this time, she didn't pull away. This time, she let him hold her. The storm inside Serena finally subsided. After months of running, tormenting herself and denying the truth, she had come to an undeniable realization. She deserved to be loved, and Damien deserved to be with his family. Serena couldn't change the past. She couldn't erase the pain that her family had inadvertently caused Damien, but she could do something else, not let the past dictate their future. So when Damien gently took her hand, Serena no longer pulled away. She let him into her life once again. In the days that followed, Damien stayed in the seaside town with Serena. He put aside his busy work in the city for a while to take care of her, to make sure she was no longer alone. Together, they prepared for the arrival of their child, from choosing baby clothes, assembling a crib, to attending prenatal checkups. In the late afternoons, they walked along the beach, hand in hand, talking about the future. "Who do you think the baby will look like more?" Serena asked, her eyes sparkling under the sunset. Damien chuckled, lightly rubbing her belly. "If they look like you, that'd be great. I don't want a kid with my stubborn attitude." Serena shot him a playful glare, but smiled happily. "I just hope our child grows up with the love of both their parents." Damien paused for a moment, then tightened his grip on her hand. "I promise you, Serena, our child will never have to grow up in loneliness like I did." For the first time, Serena felt her heart truly begin to heal. On a quiet spring night, amidst the sound of the waves crashing on the shore, their child let out a cry, greeting the world. Damien had never thought he could love someone so much until he held his tiny baby in his arms, feeling its warmth, listening to its tiny heartbeat. Serena looked at him, exhausted but filled with happiness. She took his hand, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "We did it, Damien." He bent down to kiss her forehead, his voice choking. "Yes, and from now on, I'll never let you and our child be far from me again." Their life gradually returned to peace. Serena continued working at the free clinic, but this time, she was no longer alone. Damien found a way to balance his work and family. He was no longer the man who buried himself in work as he used to. He learned to cherish every moment, from making coffee for Serena in the early mornings to playing with their child on the beach. They were not a perfect couple. They still had their arguments, stressful days due to work and family. But the most important thing was, they always chose to be together. They had overcome the past, conquered the pain, and built a future they both deserved. And on a peaceful afternoon at the beach, as the sunset painted the sky red, Damien held Serena close, gently whispering in her ear, "Thank you for giving me a family." Serena smiled, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of the man she loved. In the end, they had found where they truly belonged, in each other's arms. True love is not just about happy moments, it's about the perseverance to overcome challenges. Damien and Serena learned to face the past, accept their wounds, and forgive in order to build a new future. The story shows that we can't change the past, but we can choose how we live with it. Running away is not the solution. Only when we courageously face the truth do we find peace. Family is not just about blood. It's the choice to love each other despite all difficulties. Thank you for following this heartfelt story on the Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. London, midnight. The dim lighting reflected off the marble bar counter, casting a soft yet somber glow. The quiet clinking of glass blended seamlessly with the low hum of jazz music. Rosalie Harrington sat there, idly stirring her amber-colored cocktail with one hand while resting her chin on the other. Her vacant gaze was fixed on the empty space before her. The alcohol coursed through her veins, bringing a numbing sensation, but not enough to quell the despair gnawing at her. She was about to get married. A marriage without love, a contract between two families. She let out a bitter laugh, bringing the glass to her lips, about to drink it down when a deep voice sounded beside her. It seems I'm not the only one who needs a drink to forget something tonight. She frowned slightly and turned her head. The man beside her had eyes as deep as the midnight ocean, and his slightly tousled dark hair only added to his lazy allure. His dark shirt clung to his well-built frame, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong wrists. She let out a faint chuckle, placing her glass back on the counter. "So you have something to forget, too?" He tilted his head slightly, an unreadable smile playing at his lips. "Not exactly. I just have a habit of observing, and I noticed a beautiful woman drowning in her thoughts, forgetting the drink in her hand." Rosalie scoffed softly and motioned toward his untouched glass. "And what about you? Observing others while your own drink remains untouched?" The man chuckled, lifting his glass and clinking it lightly against hers. "Fair enough, but now I've had my drink." She tilted her head, studying him for a long moment. Perhaps it was the alcohol. Perhaps it was the soft glow of the bar. Or perhaps it was the dangerous allure radiating from him. And she needed that. "Do you want to hear a story?" He raised an intrigued brow. "What kind of story?" Rosalie gave a faint smile, her eyes darkening. "A story about a girl who has no control over her own fate." She told him about the arranged marriage, about the fiancé she had never met, about the cruel rumors surrounding him. The man listened in silence, occasionally giving a quiet chuckle, absent-mindedly swirling the liquid in his glass. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. When she finished, he set his glass down and looked at her with an unreadable expression. "So, what do you plan to do?" Rosalie pressed her lips together, her gaze drifting to the amber liquid in her glass. Then she lifted her head, her eyes filled with resolve. "I would rather give my first night to a stranger than let him have it." A suffocating silence settled between them. The man did not seem surprised. He merely tilted his head slightly, the corner of his lips lifting ever so slightly. "Are you sure?" Rosalie took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm sure." The man studied her for a few seconds before slowly placing a hotel room key on the counter, sliding it toward her. "Then let's go, my future wife." Rosalie froze, her brows furrowing slightly. Future wife? But she did not dwell on it. She did not want to think anymore. Tonight she would choose her own fate, even if just this once. Welcome to Soul Stories. Puker. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like and follow, means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a yes in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Part 1, The Fateful Pact. London, the Harrington Estate. Night had fallen over London, the late autumn wind sweeping through the cobbled streets. A light drizzle misted the city, leaving a thin veil of moisture over the glistening pavement. A sleek black Bentley glided over the gravel path, making its way down the private road leading to the Harrington Estate. A grand Georgian mansion with towering archways, large white-trimmed windows, and solemn red brick walls. The imposing iron gates slowly swung open, and the golden glow of the garden lights reflected off the polished surface of the car. Rosalie Harrington rested her head against the cool glass of the window, her vacant eyes fixed on the magnificent estate before her. This was her home, yet tonight it felt more like a prison than ever before. Her fingers curled into a tight fist. She knew that once she stepped through those doors, everything would change. The rhythmic click of her high heels echoed against the marble floors, the sound reverberating through the vast entrance hall. A dazzling crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, its light spilling onto the gleaming black floor, reflecting the image of a young woman with troubled eyes. Rosalie stepped into the grand sitting room, where her parents were already waiting. The air felt stifling. Her father, William Harrington, sat in a large armchair, his posture rigid, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. His sharp eyes were devoid of warmth. On the glass table before him, a cup of Earl Grey tea still steamed faintly, its delicate bergamot scent lingering in the air. Beside him stood her mother, Eleanor Harrington, a regal woman with her hair neatly pinned up, her expression as composed as a carefully sculpted statue. Her lips pressed together in a firm line, as if she had already anticipated her daughter's reaction. No one spoke. Outside, the wind whispered against the windows, stirring the sheer, white curtains ever so slightly. "What is this about?" Rosalie broke the silence, her voice calm, but a sense of unease clawed at her chest. Her father set his cup down, the faint clink against the saucer ringing sharply in the quiet room. "You are getting married next month." A simple statement, yet it felt like a dagger plunging straight into her heart. Rosalie froze. Even the rain outside seemed to pause, the world plunging into an unsettling stillness. "What?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You've known about the engagement between our families for years." Her mother spoke softly, but there was no trace of sympathy in her tone. "It's time to fulfill it." Rosalie's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around her clutch, nails digging into her palm. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his gaze unwavering. "The Montgomery family has made their terms clear. Our family needs this alliance to strengthen our position." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "So, I'm nothing more than a pawn in your game." "Don't put it that way," her mother murmured as she adjusted the pearl bracelet on her wrist, her voice measured and unwavering. "This is an opportunity, Rosalie. A marriage that will secure your future." A chill ran down Rosalie's spine. "Who is he?" Her father held her gaze for a long moment before finally speaking. "Alaric Montgomery." The air grew impossibly still. Every drop of blood in her veins turned to ice. Number. The name was all too familiar. He was the sole heir to the Montgomery dynasty, one of the most powerful financial empires in England. But what terrified her was not his wealth. It was what people said about him. Rumors whispered that Alaric Montgomery was ruthless. On the business battlefield, he was merciless, never sparing his rivals. He had no heart, no love, no trust in anyone. Raised in the U.S. from a young age, he cared little for family traditions. His only concern was power. Rosalie had read about his brutal takeovers, his ability to crush corporations without hesitation. He dismantled companies. He destroyed opponents. Compassion and mercy had no place in his world, and now he was to be her husband? Rosalie shook her head, grasping for logic in this madness. Number, I won't marry him. Her father barely blinked at her defiance as if expecting it. You don't have a choice. But I don't love him. Her voice rose, laced with desperation. How can I marry a man I've never even met? Her father smirked, his expression unreadable. Do you think love matters in a marriage between two great families? Rosalie's fingers dug into her palms, her hands cold as ice. Number, I refuse to accept this. Her mother's eyes sharpened. Rosalie, this is not for you to decide. The wedding will take place, whether you agree or not. Her breath hitched. Everything was crumbling around her. And if I refuse, she whispered, her voice hoarse with rage. Her father's gaze darkened, his authority undeniable. Then you will no longer be a daughter of this family. She went still. They were willing to cast her out? She turned to her mother, silently pleading for a lifeline. But her mother merely looked away. No one stood by her. Her chest tightened, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had no way out. She couldn't refuse. She couldn't escape. The wedding would happen, whether she wanted it or not. Part 2. A Reckless Choice. London. Late night. The rain continued to drizzle, casting a thin veil of mist over the city. The cobbled streets of London shimmered under the dim glow of the streetlights, painting a picture that was both romantic and desolate. Rosalie Harrington walked briskly along the pavement, the rhythmic click of her high heels echoing against the wet ground. Her beige fur coat did little to shield her from the biting cold that seeped into her skin. But she didn't care. She just needed to get away. She couldn't breathe inside the Harrington estate. You cannot refuse. This is your duty. Marriage isn't always about love. Her parents' words still rang in her head, each one slicing deeper into her heart. She felt betrayed, trapped in a life she never wanted. And worst of all, she was being forced to marry a man she had never met. All she knew about him were the chilling rumors. Alaric Montgomery, a heartless man. A man incapable of love. A ruthless businessman who crushed everything in his path to get what he wanted. And now he was to be her husband. A wave of revulsion curled in her stomach. She couldn't accept it. The windows of the upscale bar were fogged with condensation, blurring the line between the warmth inside and the cold drizzle outside. Soft golden light cascaded from ornate chandeliers, reflecting off the marble bar counter where glasses of strong liquor were poured generously. The air buzzed with murmurs of the wealthy patrons, their laughter blending with the slow, sultry rhythm of jazz. Rosalie stepped inside. A hint of alcohol already lingered in her bloodstream, but it wasn't enough to numb her thoughts. She slid onto a high bar stool, the deep red satin of her dress hugging her body, a striking contrast between allure and desperation. The bartender approached, awaiting her order. "The strongest drink you have." As the glass was set down in front of her, a deep voice sounded beside her. "A beautiful woman drinking alone on a rainy night? What a waste." Rosalie frowned slightly and turned her head, and she saw him. He was not the kind of man one could simply glance at and forget. Tousled dark hair, piercing blue eyes as deep as the midnight sea. A black dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong, veined forearms, a perfect mix of masculine elegance and danger. He wasn't like the other men in the bar. He wasn't trying too hard. He wasn't feigning charm. He simply existed, and that alone was enough to draw her in. She studied him for a moment, then smirked, raising her glass. "You're drinking alone, too. Is that a waste?" He let out a low chuckle, the sound smooth, velvety. "Perhaps." He lifted his glass, clinking it lightly against hers. "Then let's drink together." And so they drank, and they talked. Rosalie didn't know why she told him so much. Perhaps it was the alcohol. Perhaps it was the way he looked at her, without pity, without judgment, just listening. She told him about her family, about the forced marriage, about her fear of being shackled to a man without a heart. He didn't interrupt. He simply swirled the liquid in his glass, silent, waiting. When she finally fell quiet, he tilted his head, his voice a low murmur. "So, what do you plan to do?" Rosalie stared at the empty glass in her hand. A wild thought flickered through her mind. She lifted her gaze, locking eyes with him. "If tonight is my last night of freedom, then at least I want to make a choice." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Sleep with me?" A moment of silence stretched between them. His eyes darkened, sharp as a blade, though his expression remained unreadable. "Are you sure?" Rosalie didn't blink. "I'm sure." He set his glass down, fingers drumming lightly against the rim. "Once you choose me, there's no taking it back." "I don't want to take it back." He held her gaze for a long moment before rising to his feet. "Then let's go, Rosalie." He pulled her close, his firm hand resting on her waist. His breath was warm against her skin, his lips grazing her ear. "This is your last chance to regret it," she whispered back. "I won't regret it." And then the first kiss ignited. Everything blurred into a whirlwind. She felt the heat of him, his breath consuming her, his touch igniting every nerve in her body. She had never done this before. But tonight, she was the one in control. She wanted to forget everything, and that night, she belonged to him. Morning light streamed into the hotel room. Rosalie stirred, her body aching in ways she had never known before. Beside her, the man still slept. He was too handsome, dangerously handsome. Tan skin, sharp jawline, every feature chiseled to perfection. His breathing was slow, steady, far too peaceful for someone who had unraveled her world the night before. But she didn't care. To her, he was nothing but a stranger she would forget. She inhaled deeply, reached for her clothes, and left the room without a single glance back. Part 3. The Cruel Truth. Montgomery Estate. Meeting the fiancé. 1 week later, the sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop before the towering iron gates of the Montgomery Estate. Stone statues stood solemnly along the cobbled driveway, leading toward the grand white stone mansion that loomed like an impenetrable fortress. The sunlight reflected off the glass windows, making the entire estate feel both opulent and eerily cold. Rosalie sat in the car, her hands clenched tightly around the fabric of her dress, her nerves barely concealed behind her composed expression. She had been raised in high society, had stepped foot into the most extravagant estates in London, but nothing had ever felt as intimidating as this place. This was to be her home, and she didn't want to enter. She didn't want to meet him. She hated him, even though she had never met him. But she had no choice. The butler bowed respectfully as he opened the car door for her. Rosalie swallowed hard, drawing in a deep breath before stepping out. The deep wine-red silk of her dress flowed elegantly over the marble steps, her appearance the very picture of poise and aristocracy. On the outside, she was still Lady Rosalie Harrington, proud and untouchable. But inside, her heart was a storm. The grand doors of the mansion creaked open. Inside, a space of breathtaking opulence unfolded before her. Polished marble floors gleamed under the brilliance of the crystal chandelier, its light reflecting off the antique oil paintings lining the walls, each a testament to the Montgomery family's wealth and power. Yet no matter how magnificent it was, the place felt cold, unwelcoming, not home. A servant stepped forward, bowing slightly. "The young master is waiting for you in the drawing room." Rosalie's heart pounded against her ribs. The heavy oak doors swung open. She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble, her movements stiff, tension tightening around her like a noose. And then she saw him. Her heart stopped. The man lounged casually in a plush velvet armchair, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of amber liquid lazily swirling in his hand. He was too familiar. Tousled black hair, icy blue eyes, sharp sculpted features, Alaric Montgomery. But it wasn't his lethal beauty that left her paralyzed. It was the realization that he was the man from that night, the man she had slept with, the man she had chosen, thinking he was a stranger, the man she had hoped to forget. He looked at her, his lips curling into a mocking, almost cruel smirk. "Hello, my dear wife," he drawled, his voice rich with amusement. "You forgot me so quickly?" The world shattered around her. Rosalie couldn't breathe, couldn't believe it, couldn't accept it. The man she had chosen in a reckless act of defiance, the man she had thought would help her escape this arranged marriage, was the very husband she despised the most, Alaric Montgomery. The truth slapped her like a merciless whip. She took a staggered step back, her lips parting, but no words came out. Alaric rose from his seat, moving toward her with unhurried, predatory steps. His piercing gaze drank in her shock, her horror, her silence. And he enjoyed it. He relishes this. "What's wrong, darling?" His voice was deep, taunting. "Didn't you choose me?" Rosalie felt her body go rigid. Her breath came out in sharp, uneven gasps, her fingers curling into fists. She wanted to deny it, to scream that it was a mistake, that she never knew who he was, but he already knew the truth. "You knew from the beginning?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Alaric tilted his head, a lazy smirk still gracing his lips. "No." He took a slow sip of his drink, then exhaled a soft chuckle. "But now I do." A flush of rage burned through her skin, not from embarrassment, but from fury. She had thought she could walk away from that night, erase it from her memory, but fate had played a cruel trick on her. She had run straight into the arms of the man she hated most. "I didn't know it was you," she hissed, her eyes blazing with defiance. Alaric watched her with dark amusement, as if this was nothing but an entertaining game. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "But I remember, Rosalie." He paused, savoring the way her breath hitched. Then his smirk deepened. "You told me you wanted to choose your own fate." His fingers brushed against a strand of her hair, his touch sending an infuriating shiver down her spine. "And you chose me." Rosalie clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her skin. She wanted to slap him, to wipe that smug smile off his face. But she couldn't, because he had already won. She had tried to escape fate. and had willingly thrown herself into his grasp. Rosalie sucked in a sharp breath, forcing herself to regain control. She lifted her chin, her gaze burning with pure hatred. "This marriage will never have love," she spat coldly. Alaric merely chuckled as if he had expected those words. "We'll see how long that lasts, my dear wife." His fingers lightly curled around a strand of her hair, his smirk lingering. "You belonged to me before you even knew who I was." Part 4. A controversial marriage. Today, all of England turned its gaze toward Montgomery Castle, where one of the most extravagant weddings of the decade was about to take place. It wasn't just the significance of the two families that drew attention, but the anticipation of witnessing the supposed perfect union of the most powerful couple in high society. Rosalie Harrington, heiress of the prestigious Harrington family, beautiful, intelligent, and accomplished. Alaric Montgomery, the sole heir to the Montgomery financial empire, cold, powerful, ruthless. They were destined for each other. At least that's how the media portrayed it. But the reality? She was a bride forced into marriage. He was a groom who would never let her escape. Montgomery Castle had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses imported from France intertwined with rare Japanese orchids, adorning the ancient stone walls. Swarovski crystal chandeliers glittered from the towering ceilings, casting reflections over the Italian marble floors. The soft melodies of a violin orchestra filled the grand hall, blending seamlessly with the lavish yet solemn atmosphere. The guest list consisted of the elite, billionaires, royalty, and political figures. And every single pair of eyes was focused on the center aisle, where the bride was making her way toward the altar. Rosalie's wedding gown was a masterpiece, crafted by the most skilled hands in England. Every stitch was flawless, every gemstone embedded in the fabric sparkled under the light, making her look like a queen stepping out of legend. But beneath the breathtaking gown, she was nothing more than a prisoner. Her hands were bound, not by love, but by a marriage forged in chains. The media would call this a royal wedding, but to her it was a golden cage. On the outside, she smiled gracefully, stepping onto the rose-petaled path like the perfect bride. On the inside, she wanted to turn around and run, but she couldn't. Too many eyes were watching, and ahead of her, waiting at the altar, was Alaric Montgomery. Alaric stood tall, his presence commanding the entire room. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he exuded an aura of unshakable dominance. He didn't smile, but his gaze held absolute power. Every time the light caught his deep blue eyes, they seemed like an endless abyss, capable of pulling anyone into them. Rosalie didn't want to look at him, but his gaze was already locked onto her, like a predator who had finally caught its prey. She hated him, and yet, why was her heart pounding so fast? Was it rage or something else? She refused to think about it. The officiant's voice echoed through the grand hall, but Rosalie heard none of it. All she knew was that her heart was pounding, not from love, but from the fury burning inside her. Then the moment arrived. "Do you, Alaric Montgomery, take Rosalie Harrington as your lawful wife?" His answer came immediately, firm and unwavering. "I do." Then it was her turn. She couldn't say no. She knew exactly what would happen if she refused. So even though her body felt frozen, even though her heart screamed in protest, she had no choice but to speak. "I do!" Applause erupted like thunder. Rosalie wanted to laugh bitterly, but she couldn't. Alaric's strong, warm fingers tightened around hers, a silent reminder. "From now on, you belong to me." The officiant's next words sealed her fate. "The groom may now kiss the bride." Alaric stepped forward, lifting her chin with 2 fingers, his piercing gaze never leaving hers. "Don't run." Before she could react, his lips captured hers, sealing the moment before hundreds of guests. Her entire body froze. He wasn't gentle, but he wasn't forceful either. It wasn't a kiss of love. It was a kiss of possession. The media would call it a kiss of passion. But only she knew the truth. It was a warning that she would never escape him. And yet, why was her heart beating so wildly? Was it anger or something far more dangerous, something she refused to acknowledge? She hated him. She wanted to run, but she was already his wife. And Alaric Montgomery never intended to let her go from the start. Part 5, A Marriage of Fire and Ice. The bridal chamber was located in the main wing of Montgomery Castle, as vast as an art gallery, with towering crimson velvet drapes cascading from the ceiling to the polished wooden floors. At the center of the room lay a grand bed, covered in red silk sheets, a symbol of marriage. Rosalie had never hated a bed more in her life. She sat stiffly at the edge, her hands clutching at the fabric of her gown, trying to steady her breath as Alaric closed the door behind him. He shrugged off his black vest, loosened his tie, and leaned lazily against the chaise lounge, one leg crossed over the other, his gaze fixated on her, amused. "Are you planning to sit there all night, darling?" Rosalie glared at him, her voice like a sharpened blade. "I'm sleeping on the bed. You can sleep wherever you want." He arched a brow, then let out a low chuckle. "Oh? And what if I say I like sleeping in the bed?" She shot up from her seat. "I'm not sharing a bed with you." Alaric shrugged, completely unbothered. "Suit yourself, but if I recall correctly..." He stood up slowly, his deep voice laced with amusement as he strode toward her. "You didn't seem to have a problem sleeping with me that night, did you?" Rosalie's face flamed red, her hands curling into fists. "Shut up!" Alaric laughed, clearly enjoying himself. "I can't, darling. I remember you moaning my name far too well." He leaned in, his breath brushing against her skin. "And I bet you remember too." She stumbled back, glaring daggers at him. "I'd rather sleep on the floor than share a bed with you." He lifted a brow, smirking. "Suit yourself, but don't blame me if you get cold." Furious, Rosalie grabbed a pillow and threw it straight at his face. He caught it effortlessly, laughing as he shook his head. That night, the newlyweds slept at opposite ends of the room, but not for the reason she expected. He wasn't the cold and distant man that rumors painted him to be. He was worse. He was a smug bastard who loved teasing her. One afternoon, Rosalie was trying on dresses in her walk-in closet. She had just unzipped her gown when... Click! The door swung open. She had forgotten to lock it. Alaric stood right in front of her. He froze. She froze. "Alaric!" she shrieked, her arms flying up to cover herself. Alaric tilted his head, then smirked. "Just helping my wife get dressed." "Get out, you pervert!" He crossed his arms, leaning casually against the doorframe, watching her with that insufferable smirk. "I've already seen everything, love. What's there to hide?" "You!" She hurled a shoe at his face. He dodged it effortlessly, laughing before finally closing the door. Rosalie stood there fuming, her face burning. Why was she forced to marry this insufferable man? One morning, Rosalie came down to the dining hall, just as Alaric was already seated. Wearing nothing but a loosely tied robe, his dark hair still tousled, he looked devastatingly handsome, but also unbearably smug. He rested his chin on his hand, grinning lazily at her. "Good morning, darling." Rosalie ignored him, focusing on her tea. Alaric sipped his coffee, then suddenly spoke. "Don't tell me you've already forgotten that night." She choked on her tea, coughing violently. "What?" He simply lifted an eyebrow, taking another slow sip of his coffee. "I was just reminiscing. Why are you so flustered?" Rosalie threw a pastry at him. He caught it midair, bit into it and smirked. "Delicious! You bastard!" But despite his endless teasing, Rosalie soon realized something. Alaric cared for her more than she thought. Every morning, a cup of her favorite tea was already waiting for her. On cold nights, he always tucked the blanket around her, even though he'd pretend he didn't do it the next morning. When she cut her hand, he didn't say a word. He simply took her hand, held it firmly when she tried to pull away, and bandaged it himself. One night, Rosalie fell asleep in the library. She had dozed off on the couch, the book slipping from her hands. The next morning, she woke up in her own bed, warm, tucked in. She didn't remember walking back, but outside her door. Alaric was leaning against the wall watching her. Their eyes met. She opened her mouth to say something, to ask him. But then she stopped. He simply smirked, turned and walked away. She knew. He had carried her back. She still hated him. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. Part 6. The First Stirrings of Feeling. One afternoon, Rosalie attended a high society tea party. She stood among a group of elegant women, their conversations laced with veiled insults. "Oh, Rosalie, I heard you married without love." "Yes, a business arrangement, wasn't it? Do you feel lonely?" She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remain composed, but their words cut deep, like invisible daggers. And then, a low, commanding voice came from behind her. "I thought ladies of high society had manners, but I suppose I was mistaken." "Alaric." The room fell silent. He strode to Rosalie's side, his icy gaze sweeping over the women like a silent warning. "Strange. My wife is standing right here, yet you speak about our marriage as if you know it better than we do." A woman let out a nervous laugh, quickly changing the subject. Rosalie was stunned. He didn't have to intervene. But he did. That evening, Rosalie sat in the drawing room, attempting to read. But she couldn't focus. Frustrated, she wandered onto the balcony, letting the cool night air clear her thoughts. The city lights shimmered in the distance, casting a soft glow on the ancient stone walls. She noticed a book resting on the railing, seemingly forgotten. She reached for it. But just as her fingers brushed the cover, a strong gust of wind hit her. She lost her balance. "Ah!" Just as she was about to fall, a firm grip caught her waist, yanking her backward into a solid chest. A familiar woodsy scent surrounded her. Warm breath tickled her ear. Alaric. He was holding her. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest, the closeness sending a wave of heat through her skin. She could hear his heartbeat too. Steady, unwavering. She swallowed hard, her face burning. "What the hell were you thinking?" His voice was gruff, edged with something she couldn't quite place. He sounded off, as if he was shaken too. Rosalie stiffened, trying to step back, but his hand remained on her waist, not letting go just yet. Their eyes met. His blue gaze was darker than usual. Something undeniable crackled between them. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. And then Alaric broke the silence. "I didn't know you had a death wish." Her eyes flashed with irritation. "I was just getting a book." He glanced at the book still resting on the railing, then smirked. "So you almost fell off the second floor for a book. Brilliant, Rosalie." She fumed but had no retort. Without another word, he picked up the book and placed it in her hands. "Next time, just call me." And then he walked away, as if nothing had happened. But Rosalie stood there, staring at his retreating figure, her heart still racing. She couldn't deny it. Something about that moment had shaken her. A few days later, Rosalie was passing by Alaric's study when she overheard a conversation. "I want to ensure that St. Mary's Foundation continues its work. Those children can't be abandoned." She froze. St. Mary's Foundation? She had heard of it before. A charity for orphan children, providing them with free education and a safe place to live. But Alaric ran it? She couldn't believe it. He had never boasted about it, never sought recognition. He had been quietly helping those children without the world knowing. That evening at dinner, Rosalie couldn't stop thinking about what she had learned. Finally, she set down her fork, looking straight at Alaric. "I have a question." He lifted a brow, signaling for her to continue. "St. Mary's Foundation? It belongs to you?" He paused for just a fraction of a second before calmly returning to his meal. "So, you've been eavesdropping?" She bristled but didn't deny it. "I overheard. You never mentioned it." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her, his expression unreadable. Then his voice came, lower, quieter than usual. "I don't need to mention it. Those children need help. They don't need my name attached to it." Rosalie stared at him, caught off guard. This wasn't the ruthless businessman she had imagined. Not at all. Part 7. Unexpected Revelations. On Sunday morning, Alaric walked into the drawing room, holding out a piece of paper. "Come with me." Rosalie glanced at him, blinking in confusion. "Where?" He didn't answer right away, simply grabbing his coat. "You'll see." She hesitated but eventually followed. They got into the car, leaving behind the bustling city center, moving toward the outskirts. As the scenery changed from towering buildings to quiet countryside roads, Rosalie's curiosity grew. An hour later, the car came to a stop in front of an old brick building, St. Mary's Orphanage. Inside, children ran around, laughing, their voices filling the air with warmth. Then out of nowhere, a boy around 7 years old sprinted toward them, throwing himself into Alaric's arms. "Uncle Alaric!" Rosalie froze. She had never seen Alaric smile like this. Soft, genuine. He crouched down, ruffling the boy's hair. "Hey, kid, have you been good this week?" The boy grinned widely. "Yes. Did you bring me cookies?" Alaric flicked his forehead lightly, but then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box of treats. Rosalie stood still, her mind reeling. Alaric Montgomery, the man rumored to be ruthless, emotionless. Yet here he was, surrounded by children who adored him. He was nothing like the man she thought he was. For the first time in her life, Rosalie felt maybe she had been wrong about him. A strange warmth stirred in her chest. She wanted to understand him. Part 8. Love Without Promises. The moon hung high over London, its silvery light reflecting off the still waters of the Montgomery Estate's private lake, creating a serene, almost ethereal scene. Rosalie leaned against the balcony railing, the night breeze caressing her skin, tousling her hair, carrying with it the chaos of her thoughts. Everything had changed. She no longer hated Alaric. In fact, he was always there when she needed him most. From shielding her from cruel whispers, to saving her in moments of danger, to the silent ways he cared without ever saying it aloud. And now, she found herself wondering, when did he become the person she trusted the most? When did his presence start to feel familiar instead of foreign? Lost in thought, she didn't notice the approaching figure until a low, familiar voice broke the silence. "Why aren't you asleep?" Rosalie startled slightly. Alaric had joined her, his tall frame leaning against the railing, his deep blue eyes reflecting the same moonlight that lit up the night. "What are you thinking about?" She shook her head, unwilling to admit the truth, but Alaric wasn't so easily fooled. They stood there in silence, the night wind whispering between them, carrying the distant hum of the city beyond the estate's walls. Then, his voice broke the quiet. "Do you still hate me?" Rosalie froze. She turned to him, expecting to see his usual playful smirk. But instead, his gaze was serious. For once, he wasn't teasing. She didn't answer immediately. A long moment passed before she softly shook her head. Alaric let out a quiet chuckle, as if he had already known her answer. Then he took a step closer, too close, his intense gaze locking onto hers. She couldn't look away. The heat of his breath brushed her skin, the warmth of his presence pressing against her in the cold night air. And then, his voice low, husky, teasing, but different this time. "Then love me." Rosalie's heart stopped. "What?" Her eyes widened as she stared up at him, pulse hammering against her ribs. Was he serious? But his gaze didn't waver. She felt the heat rising to her cheeks, her entire body suddenly aware of how close he was. What was she supposed to say? Alaric had always teased her, but this felt real. Should she deny it? Should she push him away? But deep inside, she already knew the truth. She had already fallen for him. Instead of answering, she let out a soft, nervous laugh, a habit she had when she didn't know how to react. "Since when did you become so bold?" Alaric's lips curved into a knowing smirk, but his eyes held something deeper. "Since you started driving me insane." They stood there staring at each other, the distance between them disappearing, until there was nothing left but a single breath. Rosalie felt as though she was being pulled into him, into something undeniable, irreversible, and she didn't want to fight it anymore. Slowly, Alaric lowered his head, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was not rushed, not demanding, but deep, slow, and consuming. A silent acknowledgement. A moment where all barriers shattered. Rosalie trembled slightly, but she didn't pull away. His hand slid gently over her back, pulling her closer, wrapping her in his warmth. In the dead of winter, his touch felt like fire. The night air forgot its chill, because between them everything was burning. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing heavily, foreheads resting against each other. Rosalie looked up at him, her eyes soft, uncertain, but no longer guarded. Alaric smirked, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Are you still planning to run?" Rosalie let out a breathless laugh, her arms sliding around his neck. She whispered back, "There's no turning back now." Part 9. A perfect ending. The sunset bathed London in hues of crimson and gold, painting the sky in a masterpiece of warmth and serenity. Rosalie stood on the balcony of the Montgomery estate, gazing at the vast garden below, where the roses swayed gently in the evening breeze. The air carried the soft fragrance of wild roses, mingling with the crisp autumn air. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in, a rare moment of peace. Ever since she had married Alaric, her life had completely changed. She had once hated him, once wanted nothing more than to escape him. But now she was standing here, waiting for him, and just the thought of it made her heart flutter in an unfamiliar way. "Why are you standing here alone?" His deep, familiar voice broke the silence behind her. Rosalie smiled softly, but she didn't turn around. She knew he was there, watching her with his usual intense gaze. "Just thinking," she murmured. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. The warmth of his breath tickled her skin, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Thinking about what?" His voice was lazy, but there was curiosity in it. She hesitated for a moment before turning to face him, their eyes meeting beneath the glow of the setting sun. After a brief silence, she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty, "Alaric, that night at the bar, did you know who I was?" Alaric raised an eyebrow, then let out a quiet chuckle. He held her gaze as if debating whether to tell her the truth. "Number I didn't know you then?" Rosalie blinked, startled by his answer. Before she could question him further, he took her hand, squeezing it lightly. "I met you by chance." Her heart skipped a beat. So, it had all been a coincidence? But before she could dwell on it, he continued, his voice quieter this time. "At first, when I heard how much you despise this marriage, I considered calling it off." Rosalie's eyes widened in shock. Alaric let out a low chuckle, a flicker of amusement dancing in his gaze. "But the more I talked to you, the more intrigued I became, especially the moment you proposed spending the night with me." He leaned in slightly, his warm breath brushing against her ear. "That was when I knew I wasn't letting you go." Rosalie flushed, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She raised a shaky hand and lightly pushed his chest, stammering, You really are dangerous." Alaric laughed softly, but he didn't release her. She tried to compose herself, but her emotions were in turmoil. Her gaze searched his, and before she realized it, she asked, "What if I had chosen someone else that night?" Alaric's expression darkened instantly. His jaw tightened, and his blue eyes glinted with something dangerously possessive. "Don't even think about it." Rosalie giggled, tilting her head. "Are you jealous?" Alaric didn't answer. Instead, he closed the distance between them, his intense gaze locking onto hers. "Rosalie, if you had given that night to another man..." His voice dropped into a husky whisper, his lips brushing against hers. "I would have never forgiven you." Before she could tease him again, he captured her lips in a deep, consuming kiss. But this time, it wasn't a game. It wasn't a battle of wills. It was a claim, a promise. Rosalie melted into him, her arms instinctively wrapping around his neck. Alaric's hands tightened around her waist, pulling her impossibly close, as if he would never let her go again. There were no more doubts, no more hatred, no more walls between them. They had become each other's fate, and this time neither of them wanted to escape. Epilogue. 2 years later. 2 years later, Montgomery Castle was filled with the laughter of children. The golden rays of morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows, casting a warm glow across the polished marble floors. In the lavish drawing room, 2 twin toddlers, a boy and a girl, were running across the plush velvet rug, their giggles echoing through the space. The little boy had dark hair and sharp blue eyes, a miniature version of Alaric. The little girl had a gentle smile carrying the delicate features of Rosalie. They were fiercely battling over a teddy bear, their tiny hands pulling from opposite sides. But the moment they spotted someone stepping into the room, their argument vanished, and both sprinted toward the towering figure. "Daddy!" Alaric raised an eyebrow, kneeling down with open arms to catch both of them. "What's going on here? Are you two fighting again?" His son pouted, clinging onto his father's leg. "I wasn't fighting. Sophia stole my teddy." Little Sophia crossed her arms, scowling like an old lady in a tiny body. "I didn't steal it. It's mine." Alaric let out a deep laugh, ruffling their hair. "If you two keep bickering, your mother will punish both of you." From a distance, Rosalie leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold with silent admiration. She still couldn't believe that this was her life now. 2 years ago, she had hated Alaric, had thought she would never accept their marriage. But fate had a strange sense of humor. The man she once tried to escape from had become the man she loved the most in the world. And now, they had the perfect family. Alaric glanced up, his gaze meeting hers across the room. A smirk played on his lips, soft yet still carrying his signature arrogance. "Why are you just standing there, darling? Come here." Rosalie laughed softly, stepping forward, her eyes filled with warmth. Alaric wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her down beside him. Their children climbed onto their laps, babbling about everything and nothing, their tiny voices a melody of joy. Rosalie looked up at Alaric, happiness shining in her eyes. Then she whispered, "Have you ever wondered, what would have happened if I hadn't met you that night?" Alaric chuckled, tilting his head. "There's no what if, Rosalie." She blinked, curious. He took her hand, squeezing it gently as he spoke, his voice deep and unwavering. "Because no matter what happened, you would have been mine. It was only a matter of time." Rosalie couldn't help but laugh, shaking her head. "You are insufferably arrogant," she whispered, but her eyes were full of love. Alaric only grinned, then lowered his head to kiss her, his lips capturing hers under the golden morning light. The twins shrieked, covering their eyes with their tiny hands. "Ooh, Mommy and Daddy are kissing!" Alaric threw his head back in laughter, but he didn't let go of Rosalie. Outside the window, the sunlight bathed the gardens in a golden glow, a new day unfolding with warmth and promise. Love didn't need grand declarations. It only needed two people willing to walk toward each other. Rosalie and Alaric were always meant to be. No matter the storms, no matter how much they tried to run, they would always find their way back to each other. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.